Good evening and welcome, Dharma brothers and sisters, to another term of Rongton Buddhist Training College Tuesday evening philosophy classes, both online and in person. We have a handful or so of people here in person, as well as about 15 or 16 online, it seems. So welcome everyone. And this is for the third term of 2023. This term's topic is the afflictions according to the Abhidharma by Vasubandu, a classical Indian Buddhist scholar, and Abhidharma being one of the three pitakas or baskets of Buddhist scripture. So in case there's anyone new online, I'll introduce our teacher, who's also our founder and spiritual director, Lama Choedak Rinpoche. Rinpoche was born into a nomad family in Tibet, and his family escaped when Tibet was invaded. He trained as a monk with some of Tibetan Buddhism's most eminent masters of this generation in Nepal and India in the Tibetan settlements. He completed a 3.5-year solitary retreat, earning him the title of Lama, or teacher. He later received the honorary title of Rinpoche, High Lama, in recognition of his translation work into English, as well as his expertise in transmitting traditional teachings to contemporary audience, as he's doing in this course with ourselves. So just before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our benefactors and sponsors who are making courses such as this free for all, as well as our committee and technical team for making these teachings available. So on that note, I'll pass you over to Rinpoche. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila, and hello everyone. Nice to see you and have your company. Thank you. This is, as Jamila mentions, our third term after a couple of weeks of break, the semester or term break. So we are starting this time as a new term and new topic of knowledge, but I don't think new topic of problems, because afflictions are not new to us. So before we start the teachings, as usual, we will do the formality of reigniting our passion and devotion and commitment and devotion and faith and belief in the profound teachings of the Buddha, which we do so by doing a prayer called refuge. These prayers are sometimes mostly done in Pali, in the Theravada tradition. In Tibetan, we do in Tibetan, but here in Australia, we do in English. Maybe we should do in the First Nations language, which unfortunately I don't know. So anyway, we do this. So please join your hands at the heart, and most of you know the prayer by heart. If not, we could probably screen share. So this mainly brings to our attention to the qualities of the Buddha, the enlightened one, who is so rare and so incredible, because the entire teaching of Buddhism and its spirit, its message, did not exist without the Buddha coming to the world, which is such a rare collective merit. So the Buddha gem. And second is, because of his enlightenment, then the teaching came. So teaching Dharma gem. To most of us, Buddha is very, very far. But once the teachings touched in our life, we realize how precious it is, and therefore his teachings touch us like a gem. We were actually we were destitute. Until we have Dharma, we are destitute, really. I'm not monetarily. If you are a millionaire, please don't feel offended. if you have a couple $100,000 in the bank and have a couple nice house, cars, I don't mean they're destitute, but the people feel still empty without the Dharma, without some qualities. So Buddhistically, we could definitely say Dharma is the true wealth. So we all have the access to rely, to adhere to the gem of Dharma because of the Buddha. Buddha gem, a Dharma gem. So that's the first triple gem, Buddha gem. The second is Dharma gem. Dharma means teaching, the way. And the third is the Sangha. Sangha is community, living Sangha. Buddha's disciple, his disciple, disciple's disciple, all the way up to our author of these teachings, Vasubandu, who lived in 4th century. And that's quite a long time ago, that's 7 centuries before. And then from then onwards, all the way up till now, the great living teachers like His Holiness Dalai Lama and the precious teachers I have been able to meet, and many of you have also met, so we should all feel very grateful. Every time I see the Venerable Sangha members from any traditions, I really rejoice. Oh, Dharma is alive, because these people are giving their life, their time, their dedication, and that has kept the Dharma gem pass on to us, because there's a living Sangha. While the living Sangha members are contemporary and what we call ordinary Sanghas, they're ordinary in the sense they are not arhats and bodhisattvas. Some maybe, we are not saying they are not. There are much fewer arhats and bodhisattvas these days than there were during Buddha's time. During Buddha's time, all his audience was just arhats and bodhisattvas. I don't know whether you and I would be allowed to sit in. So all the audience of the Buddhas were all the Mahasangas, the arhats and bodhisattvas, Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri and Moggallana Putra and Shariputra and all the arhats are sitting and following the Buddha everywhere, Incredible, really. Just think about that. And even when the Buddha passed away, the succession of the arhats did not finish. It's continued. Incredible, really. Even up until 4th century. It's quite a long time. From 5th century BC. That's 900 years after Buddha's passing away. Vasubandhu was one of those disciples. I don't know whether he is regarded as arhat during his day or not, but later on who he was, who he became, he is regarded as a panditas, His great authors. 6 ornaments and 2 excellence, great masters of India. Vasubandhu is one of them. That's 900 years after Buddha passed away. And then, amazing, that's during Vasubandhu's time, there were Buddhist pilgrims from China and elsewhere already arrived in India. And somebody who translated the biography of Vasubandhu is a Paramartha. He translated that into Chinese. So the living lineage is incredibly continued since then to many countries. And this is the Sangha gem. So we must be very, very grateful. For instance, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the good fortune to meet my teacher. And definitely, I would be a yak herder in Tibet, stuck in the northern grasslands, and drinking some Chinese beers, and that's like that, But so not that a very small amount of commitment and joy and dedication that I have in the Dharma came from Sangha gem of my teacher. And you wouldn't believe how much respect my teacher has to his teacher is not comparable with my respect to him. The senior, previous the teachers, they have much higher regard for their teachers, as if they were the living Buddha. They never regarded them as a mere Sangha. But these days, it's very difficult to have such regard to living teachers. We live in a completely different, degenerate time. It's very difficult to be a good Sangha, a stable Sangha, even ordinarily. Even so, that's why we should honor those. When we honor those things, then we be a little bit more gentler towards our present Sangha members, and then we are not so critical and so negative as this society seems to be otherwise. Those who remember and those who have refuge in the Triple Gem, they have moral commitment to show respect to the Sangha, not just because the Sanghas are perfect. Sanghas are still human beings in robes, remember that. Just imagine one of you become shaven right now in front of everybody and don on a robe, That doesn't mean you enlightened. It just, So remember, we have to be respectful for our Sangha, careful and gentle with each other, and encourage with each other, and be tolerant with each other, and not being too overly critical and negative towards each other. That's what refuge in the Sangha means. Sangha isn't worshipping people. Sangha isn't keeping the community harmoniously in positive sense, how to make sure that our next generation gets the benefit of our respect that we show to our teachers and so on. So when we say the refuge, it's not just a formality that we should say at the beginning of teaching, but it's that how every day we must remember the Triple Gem, and how we, as one who have believe in the refuge, must actualize, must be kind to each other, Sangha members. We ourselves is an ordinary Sangha. And in Buddhism we need 4 Sanghas, 4 members of Sangha. No, ordained monk is not the only Sangha. It will not suffice. You need ordained monk, ordained woman, layman, lay woman. If there are these 4 working harmoniously together, then there is Sangha. Not vice versa, not just the perfect Sanghas, no devotees, not like that. Probably where there is a perfect devotees, they will earn the collective merit of the Sanghas of the ordained ones and so on. So when we take refuge in the Triple Gem, it's not just a formality at the very beginning, but we should always remember how to treat, how to show courtesy as a fellow Dharma brothers and sisters, at least, if not as exalted Sanghas. So taking refuge in the Triple Gem is a very important. And then generation of the bodhicitta, the motivation with which we should do the listening and teaching for the benefit of not just today or tonight, or for self, but for the benefit of all, with such holistic, altruistic motivation, we respect. So with this in mind, we'll do the prayers now. Thank you, everybody. Oh. Buddha Dhamma Sangha Aite refuge Lord by virtue of Yevandala Ashare Buddha Utuve and Buddha Dhamma Sangha Aite future Lord by virtue of Yevandala Ashare Buddha Utuve and Buddha Dharma I tere future light by virtue of Yevandala I share Buddha May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they know a path of happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they know a path from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they know a path from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion, those near and far. According to the intelligence and predisposition of the Yachanda Dharma goals. Be able to be with you all again. Every time I have these classes, I don't think of myself as teacher. I think of myself as a student because I'm having to read the root texts, consult the commentaries, and look for various other interpretation and so on. I just got back from a week overseas in Borobudur. So this time I didn't have as much time that I usually would have given to prepare. But this being first lesson, I'll be okay. But usually I have the whole week to read this incredible text. Tonight's topic is it comes from this big volume which is called Abhidharmakosha. Abhidharmakosha is one of the 18 main text books in Tibetan monastic schools and traditions, and I have these 18 books was given to me when I went to Tibet in 2011 by one amazing Khenpo. He published all the books in a book form, And when he knew that I was in Lhasa, he delivered to my hotel, because he published it in Chengdu somewhere, 500 copies, and I have never met this Khenpo, but we have heard of each other, and so I'd like to thank this Khenpo Kunga Zangpo of Ngor Monastery. And of course, I have benefited from all the books, and this particular one. Just briefly, I went to Borobudur. Borobudur, some of you may have been. Have anybody been to Borobudur? Maybe some of you have heard of it, yeah? Yeah, you wouldn't believe it's a incredible. They say it's the largest Buddhist monument in the world that's built in 8th century, and that's a peak of Buddhism in Indonesia, and in Indonesia Buddhism spread very strong since then, stayed until late 13th century. So 500 years. After that, they had very big volcano eruption because it's not far from Yogyakarta, which is the epicenter of all the volcanoes, and much has been completely buried under that, and wasn't discovered until the Dutch in 18th century. Anyway, so I've been really wanting to go there many times. This time I went, and I was amazed by the dedication of people of those days who were devout Buddhists. Because we hear stories of the great Atisha in 11th century leaving India, going in search of this great famous Buddhist teacher in Golden Isle, in Swarnadipa, which is Golden Isle, which is part of Indonesia. Those days, it was not known as Indonesia in Tibetan texts. They called Swarnadipa. Swarna means Golden Isle, which means island of gold. And there, the voyage about Atisha's voyage to that, they say, southeast from Bay of Bengal, because Atisha came from east Bangladesh. Right now it's Bangladesh. Modern Bangladesh is, Atisha's birthplace. And when he traveled many, many months, on sea, and then he finally reached, then talks about how big the temple was, and exactly. So this is the temple. There may be many such temples, in Indonesia. There's most of them still underground. Only few of them were accidentally discovered by Dutch explorers, and then they alerted the authorities of the Dutch government those days, and they excavated. And then right now, the UNESCO has become very involved in not only excavating more, but maintaining it under the direction of UNESCO. But it's just become an archaeological site more than a religious site because there is no real practicing Buddhist that has any say or custodianship of the place. And so that is a place that came as a direct result of the spread of teachings in India in the 8th and 9th century. Buddhism was still very strong in India, so, and of course, some people say that Buddhism spread to Tibet, but with the coming of Atisha from wherever Atisha went and studied in. So that would be Indonesia, But then, good 100 or a year later, then Buddhism no more. It's a huge volcano eruption, completely buried everything. Not to mention all other political upheavals that happened. So anyway, after going and having seen those monuments, it reminded me the very temples in India, like Ajanta and Ellora, was built in 4th century AD, and those buildings in Indonesia built 400 years after that. So you can see the amazing resemblance of the architecture and all the Jatakamala stories, complete life of the Buddha. Not just this present life's Buddha, all his past 500 perfect lives are all depicted in reliefs. The whole temple is bas reliefs. This and depicting the whole three realms. Three realms, what we call the lower one is the desire realm, Kamadhatu, and then the second realm is the Rupa Dhatu, and the top one is Arupa Dhatu. So whole structure, whole concentric, structure is based on Buddhist cosmology. This is described in Abhidharma. In Abhidharma, we have what we call the whole chapter on the Buddhist cosmology described, and there the whole temple is depicted as a huge mandala. So I was very, very much amazed. And then when I was thinking about this topic, that we're going to tackle this term, which is a text written by Vasubandu. So now let's look a little bit about the identity of Vasubandu. His name is Vasu. Vasu means jewel. Bandhu means friend of jewels. Vasubandu. He lived in 4th century. He's younger brother of Asanga. Asanga, as some of you remember, is the author of the 5 important Buddhist books, traditionally called 5 Signs of Maitreya, because they tend to attribute to Maitreya then to Asanga. Anyway, Asanga is the elder brother who was Mahayanist monk, Buddhist monk, and Vasubandhu is half-brother of Asanga, half only in the sense they have different fathers, but same mother. And Vasubandhu lived in the early 400 AD, and all the scholars place him in that century, 4th century. So Vasubandhu was not a direct disciple of famous identity like Nagarjuna or Aryadeva or anything like that, but he has his own other teachers of the day. He was born in Peshawar, which is modern Pakistan. If you go to Peshawar, you will see how old a city it is. Peshawar is not only important birthplace of Vasubandhu, but Peshawar is also not far from Takshila. Takshila is one of the main Buddhist universities. These days we don't talk a lot about it because we don't know much about it as much as it should. We only talk about Nalanda, as Buddhism was only in the northeastern corner of India. No, Buddhism spread, the Central Asian Republic spread very much from that area, even more so, particularly Kashmir, and the Peshawar is, of course, southwest of Kashmir. His brother Asanga studied in Kashmir, and Vasubandhu first mainly committed to study as a Theravadan Buddhist monk. His mother was very committed to make sure that her sons will become great holders of the Dharma by seeing that how weak Buddhism was becoming during her time. She was very concerned. She herself was a very learned Buddhist nun, by the way. But remember how much respect or lack of it to females and Buddhist nuns in those days as much as these days. Things hasn't changed much, unfortunately. And she had the foresight to not live as a nun anymore, but she deliberately renounced as a life of a nun, but became married. And she therefore mothered at least 3 sons with 3 different fathers. She wanted to make sure each of her sons became Dharma upholders. But 3rd son, she was not successful to become Buddhist, let alone Buddhist monastic. But the first 2 sons, the eldest Asanga, second Vasubandhu, both became very diligent students of Dharma. Vasubandhu is very much well known, not so much we know about his youth, but for so much about his work for Abhidharmakosha. This is the topic which we are going to go over. Primarily, the Abhidharmakosha is not a Mahayana text, by all means. It's totally Theravada Buddhist text. It is everything that is taught inside the Abhidharmakosha is almost in agreement with Theravada literature. And that's very nice to know, because often people think, as a Mahayana Buddhist, have a version that Buddha never taught. But at least Abhidharma, like the Vinaya, Abhidharma, and Sutra are the 3 collection of Buddha's teachings. And Vasubandhu wrote number of texts, and his text was not well received during his time or afterwards. It is very dense and very complicated. It probably can be said so even today. I find that too. I'm sure there's a lot better way to write. But his writings, like all Indian scholars of those days, were mnemonic. His writings are versified and therefore mnemonic, styled to remember very easily if you use it to memorize. So you must respect why they did so, was that the literature, written literature was not easy coming, but memorized literature was. So more easy it is to memorize mnemonically, that much it was circulated better. However controversial Vasubandu's writing, the Abhidharmakosha was, because he even challenged his own teacher called Sanghabhadra. Sanghabhadra was a great exponent of Theravada tradition, and of which he was the teacher to Vasubandhu. But the writings of Vasubandhu did challenge some of his teachers' writings as well, and they even there nearly even happened a time to have an actual formal debate between him and his teacher. So probably there was a touch of intellectual arrogance, if you may say, from the point of view of Vasubandhu, that was not well received by his contemporary, because he even challenged his teacher's views, which is quite okay, from the intellectual point of view. You're quite okay to do that. Anyway, so he has a little bit of fallout with his teachers and contemporary, because his writing was treated as thorny bush. Whoever went nearby, it caught on their rags, and it didn't go well with everyone. Remember, when he first read the 600-verse Abhidharmakosha to his disciples, most people say, "What the hell are you talking about?" And most people would not understand and argue. Then he was made to write his auto commentary. Auto commentary. He was made to write his own commentary so that people can understand. Otherwise, it was too dense and too maybe meaningful for him and other scholars. But for those who don't know, it is so dense and so difficult to understand. So he wrote his auto commentary.
Is that the Bhasham?
Bhasham, yeah. So auto commentary is very famous because nobody could actually touch his Abhidharmakosha. Kosha is Karika, which is versified meter version, and Bhasham is the commentary. Auto commentary is necessarily prose, So anyway, his writings later on were studied by a number of his contemporaries, and particularly after people read his Bhashyam, which is the commentary, and other people also wrote commentaries, commentary on his texts. There are a number of Indian commentaries in addition to his own auto commentary. There's a number of other commentaries in the Tibetan Tengyur, such as by Yashomitra and others. And all of these are translated, by the way, into Tibetan as well as in Chinese. They were first translated into Chinese in as early as 7th century by Xuanzang. Xuanzang is the most celebrated Chinese Buddhist pilgrim who traveled in 623 in India and spent a number of years, and then he returned to India in China as a great saint. He always was, and he still is. And he translated Abhidharmakosha Karika as well as Bhashyam, as well as all the commentaries, all in Chinese. So therefore, Vasubandhu's work, Abhidharmakosha, became very famous. Not only it circulated very well in India, it had a number of commentaries in India, but also got translated even more and appreciated elsewhere, such as in China and in Tibet. Later on, because Vasubandhu was more like a Theravadan scholar, Vaibhashika, and maybe Sautantrika, some people would not know which one he really was proponent of, because later on they think he also became a Chittamatrin. So, I mean, you're allowed to change your camps, you change your philosophy. You don't have to be holding one school of thought in your whole life, And so he became a Vaibhashika and Sautantrika, and then later a Chittamatrin. But he was not a very willing. He was very, very critical of Mahayana literature, because he didn't study Mahayana, and little he knew about Mayan literature, he made a lot of scathing remarks about Mahayana literature. His brother, on the other hand, Asanga, became very big, important exponent of Mahayana literatures, and so Asanga felt a little bit threatened by the aggression shown by his younger brother, because he is not willing. He made many critical remarks about Mahayana literature at the early stages, which many people do until they know what the thing they're talking about. Because most of the criticism we make to others is because we don't know what they really are. Anyway, so the story says that Asanga was very concerned that his younger brother's popularity and circulation, his writing was so threatening that he said he must go and do something about converting his younger brother to Mahayana. So it is said that Asanga made two of his main disciples to memorize two Mahayana literatures, Mahayana sutras, and make them both go and live near Vasubandu and chant it every morning out loud. Until the Vasubandu can't say that he hasn't heard any Mahayana literatures. And because Vasubandu is very intelligent, by the time he overheard these monks chanting these, that he was very, very enticed to learn and read the Mahayana literatures. So anyway, his elder brother had to scheme this so that he can skillfully go and convert his younger brother into Mahayana Buddhism. Anyway, later on, Asanga was skillful enough to convert his younger brother to Mahayana Buddhism, and then you wouldn't believe. Vasubandu is the commentator of many of the 5 books of the Maitreya and Asanga we talked about. So that shows that Vasubandhu's career as author has a lot of controversies, because everything he wrote when he was young, as a Theravadan, as a Vaibhashika scholar and Sautantrika scholar, he wrote everything later on, everything that he argued against the Mahayana in those literature became a little bit sort of he himself must have felt was no longer relevant. Anyway, Vasubandhu achieved great notoriety as a very great, brilliant scholar. He was open. He traveled, and then later on, he became very famous for his writing and teachings. Wherever he taught his Abhidharmakosha, he was received very well. He received huge honor and gift, and from the kings and so on. And then the king of Ayodhya actually invited him to come and live in his city as his royal preceptor. And then Vasubandhu did just that. Asanga's trick to convert his brother worked. There are different accounts how he did that. One account is exactly what I said. Another account is he sent a letter to his brother requesting to come to stay, look after him, because he was now sick and old and dying. Asanga saying, "I'm too old, I'm your elder brother, I have no one, you must come and look after me." He wrote a letter. That wasn't the purpose. Purpose wasn't, elder brother wasn't looking his younger brother to become his carer or a caregiver, because there was no government subsidy. In Australia, we could ask our brother to look after the brother so that the government can give caregivers pension. So there wasn't anything like that. Anyway, that his letter to say, I'm sick, you must come and look after me, worked. And then Vasubandhu come, and then Asanga asked him to recite Mahayana Sutras to him, because he's too elderly to read himself, that someone loving like his younger brother will read this, it will help him. So he wasn't suggesting you should learn this, but please read this so that I get some comfort. So you should do that too, you know. You should do that too next time. You don't know what to do with your nephews or grandchildren, and they love you, but you say, I'm sick, I'm elderly, grandmother, grandfather, can you read this story to me? And that will slowly. Anyway, Asanga was able to persuade Vasubandhu to read Mahayana Sutras. By the time Vasubandhu had read many Mahayana Sutras, he was converted. He was converted, because what does a good book do? A good book changes you. I'm sure many of you are like that. You must have found a good Dharma book, and then it. But here the story says, however, Vasubandhu's writing suggests that his conversion was more gradual than that sudden. So Vasubandhu's conversion to Mahayana was not that gradual, not that sudden, but gradual, because Vasubandhu wrote 2 other works. One is called Panchaskanda Prakarana, that is on the 5 skandhas by itself, and another work on Karma Siddhi Prakarana, that is on the law of cause and effect. So these are both the 2 topics that also features 2 chapters in this very book. But he has earlier written separate. He has written separate works on this. I don't know whether it's earlier or before, but from this reading suggests that Vasubandhu's conversion to Mahayana was more gradual than sudden. Yeah, but there is nothing in the nothing in the Abhidharmakosha itself that it was there was few remarks about the qualities of the Buddha and things like that, which is nothing surprising here and there. But otherwise, he wasn't talking greatness of the Mahayana, for instance. Whereas his later works talks a lot about the greatness of Mahayana, and he became a commentator to his brother's writing and so on. So that would have been much after. So Abhidharmakosha is much earlier work. But Vasubandhu also engaged in a number of debates among Buddhists and non-Buddhists and so on. Losing major debate would involve forced conversion to or banishment. But here he would have definitely had engaged some debate with his brother as well. So suggestion is that his brother was victorious, victorious in their debate, as well as his skillful way of asking him to read the book to make him, give him some comfort. It definitely brought comfort to the mind of Vasubandhu, to the extent of him not having such a kind of adverse view to Mahayana teaching before, because there was a lot of adverse kind of aversion between the literary scholars. And polemically, their writing is very much indicative of the language they use. And so, anyway, Vasubandhu became very victorious in most of the debate prior to his meeting his brother, that he became very famous and very wealthy, and building monasteries, hospitals, schools. Vasubandhu was involved in that because he was so well off. He was receiving so many rich donors and sponsors. Later in his life, then he wrote books on Yogacara, which is the mind-only school. So that means he's already turned into Mahayanist. So he became what is called, there's 22 works called Vimsatika and Trimsatika, which is 20 verses and 30 verses. They are 2 small works, but they are both Yogacara works, Yogacara Buddhist works. Anyway, some point in later in life, it said that Sanghabhadra, that is his teacher, who he was very critical of sought him and wanted to challenge Vasubandhu to engage in a debate. And so the Vasubandhu is asked to defend his work, like a thesis. You have to defend the Abhidharmakosha, and his teacher wanted to challenge him, and he wanted to. Vasubandhu by this time declined, saying he says a lack of interest, and also saying I'm too old. And if you don't want to accept my writing, so be it. Some people says that he also realized some of his writings in the Abhidharmakosha wasn't defendable, so he basically fled. He basically fled from having to engage in debate with his teacher, excusing himself in one version by saying that there was no one in the area who could adequately judge the debate. Means that nobody can be the judge of the actual debate between him and his teacher. But inner story is that he actually realized some of the points he written were also quite indefensible. It's quite possible, yeah. I mean, you will find your earlier writings, you realize, oh, I wish I didn't write that. And then if somebody wanted to come and debate with that, of course, you either have to accept that or not to engage in such a debate. So therefore, he thought it was unwise to confront his teacher, who has a much greater following than him, and so. Anyway, so the Tibetan historian Bhutan reports that while Vasubandhu was in the north, which is Kashmir, he went to visit a monk named Handu. Handu was inebriated and saying an immense pot of wine, carrying an immense pot of wine on his shoulder. Vasubandhu, upon seeing this, cried, "Alas, the doctrine will go to ruin. Recite the Ushnisha Vijaya Dharani in reverse order." He didn't want this man to behave the way he was behaving. So Vasubandhu made him to recite the Ushnisha Vijaya Dharani back to front. And that caused him to die. According to Taranatha, which is another Tibetan historian in the 16th century, Vasubandhu was prompted to recite the Dharani in reverse order and then saw a monk plowing in monastic robes. So they thought that was a bad time, because in monks having to plow their fields, they thought it was very bad. And in any case, so there was that kind of, so there's two different stories, yeah. One Vasubandhu made the monk to recite the Dharani back to front, make the monk to die. The another is Vasubandhu was prompted to recite the Dharani in reverse order by seeing monks plowing fields with oxes and so on, having to do menial labor, which is a sign of a degeneration of Sangha, because nobody look after, they have to do it themselves. I remember when the Tibetan monks in South India, when they had to do this kind of thing in the mid-70s, some of them cried, They had to go and plow the fields. They have to grow their own food, because there were nobody. Indian government at least gave them land to grow. They all cried because they thought this was the end of the doctrine, that they have to go and plow the land. So this wasn't the first. That's in 1970s, but this is in 470 or something. Anyway, so from that, the story above explains the striking feature of Abhidharmakosha, whereas the verses expound the Vaiveshika school, which is the Theravada tradition. Commentary often refutes it. Most commentaries are refuting many of the points that are written in that. It says here that by the person who has put this story together. However, it seems doubtful that the verses were composed first in their entirety as a standalone work. I'm sure the authors would have amended and changed the work over the years. Certain verses are incoherent without interlinear commentary. Yeah, so even today when people read it, they look a little bit internally contradictory. So that means Vasubandhu's work is not an original work. He was basing an existing Abhidharmic text, because Abhidharma is strewn all over in the Buddhist literature. If you look at the Digha Nikaya Sutras and in the Theravada Pali text, there are three versions: longer version, middle version, and shorter version. They are Abhidharma the points of all this that are covered in these texts are all in those sutras. So these are not some original ideas of Vasubandhu, but they are all found in the Buddha Vachana, which is the words of the Buddha, and then taken from the words of Buddha, these things were written by scholars like Vasubandhu. Perhaps as Vasubandhu composed the text, his own hesitation regarding the Vaiveshik system deepened until the commentary took a turn from explication to actually refuting many of the essential tenets of the opposite schools. So therefore, there have been a number of changes. By the time when Vasubandhu wrote the commentary, auto-commentary, that commentary had to cater for the opposition that he faced when he taught the Karika itself, So obviously, some wording or some verses from the original Abhidharmakosha Karika would have changed, modified on top of his commentaries that he gave it to elucidate the meanings of the others. Because you will see, here the reading says, they will see, however, there are few places where Vasubandhu expressed deep appreciation of bodhisattvas, which can be seen as portent of his later full-fledged conversion to Mahayana. So this shows the Abhidharmakosha was not a standalone text that he wrote before he became Mahayana. It went through some changes and adaptation as his own thought and views changed. So there are quite a number of verses that are pointed here in this person's research, that how inconsistent Abhidharmakosha is as a standalone pure Theravadan text. And that's why among the Theravadins, they don't know who the hell is Vasubandhu. Let alone study his texts. It's only the Mahayanist says he was an ex-Theravada and who wrote this as a Theravada text and later on converted to become Mahayanist, So that shows that Vasubandhu was never accepted as a Theravadan literature, at least by modern Theravadins. They don't even accept Nagarjuna, let alone Vasubandhu. so our Theravadins have a lot to learn. That we think we had these amazing luminaries, because all the names of authors, like we talk about the 17 Panditas, like His Holiness Dalai Lama these days identifies, they are all historical identity, by the way. And those who have made a huge impression on Buddhist literature and particularly Tengyur, the Shastras, which is commentary literatures, they are all very, very luminaries, recognizable history. But Theravadins do not know any of them. None of these teachers that Mahayanas regard as Nalanda Panditas features in any of the Theravada literatures. If you look at the Buddha Ghosha's writing on Vishuddhimagga, which actually covers most of these topics in Abhidharmakosha are all in that book Vishuddhimagga too. But Vishuddhimagga Buddhaghosa does not mention anything about people like Abhidharmakosha, texts like Abhidharmakosha, or author like Vasubandhu. So you can see India was vast and big, and those who knew themselves as Theravadins only knew themselves as Theravadins. And those who were Mahayanists only knew about themselves, and they didn't know really who is who otherwise. So that shows, these days, of course, scholars always really wonder who is who. Some people, when they did research, one of the early academics in the 80s, he thought there was two Vasubandhus. One who's the Yogacarya in Vasubandu, and another who's the author of the Abhidharmakosha, because the contents of them are contrastingly very different. Because they think you could not be a linguist as well as scientist. They think that a true person cannot be specialist in two areas. They think like that. Of course, that's not the case. People studied 5 fields of study in those days. Panditas has to master 5 fields of studies. Of course, later scholars totally refute this gentleman's proposition that there were two Vasubandhus and 2 Nagarjunas, because they could not fathom. Modern scholars couldn't fathom. The same scholars can write on totally different topics and hold different views. They thought that has to be a different person. Firstly, that, and secondly, the dating and all that is very difficult with Indian history. Indian history in general, and Buddhism no different. Indians are not really good at keeping dates because they believe in everything go in cycles. So they see no point keeping record in a linear fashion. Anyway, Abhidharmakosha, study of Abhidharmakosha became very famous after it was introduced more so in China and Tibet, where it became officially adopted as a textbook, as I mentioned, and it has huge number of commentaries. You would not believe that in Tibetan and I don't know about Chinese. And of course there's already 6 Indian commentaries. These Indian commentaries are very early ones, way before 7th, 8th century, these are pre-8th century commentaries. Yashomitra and all of their commentaries are still sitting in the among the Tengyur commentaries. So that shows that it did enjoy great circulation in India by the numerousness of the commentary it enjoys in India, and as well as it has more than 50 commentaries in Tibetan Buddhism. Because like in Sakya alone, there's at least 20 commentaries, 20 commentaries. And the one most famous commentary in Tibet is by Chim. This is the book I was talking about. His commentary, very early, because it's like probably early 12th century commentary. And then there are many more other commentaries, like the first Dalai Lama wrote a very famous commentary, and Rongton Sheja Kunri wrote a commentary, which I got here as well. That's another book. And then there are many other such commentaries. Anyway, it is believed that Vasubandhu reached great height of spiritual realizations through his work and meditation, and some people believe he passed away in Nepal. So how much Vasubandhu is regarded as a Buddhist patriarch in China he's very very high in the Buddhist hierarchy, Buddhist patriarch. If you look at the lineage of the Zen and Chan Buddhism, and Vasubandhu features very high up on the list, probably before Bodhidharma. Or after Bodhidharma, I'm not timing-wise, I'm not quite sure. So that's the little bit of background of the text itself. Now the author of the text, Vasubandhu, and these days, of course, Vasubandhu is among the 17 Nalanda Pandita to towards each of whom His Holiness Dalai Lama has written a one-verse eulogy to all of this. And he has actually requested, in recent years, by the way, wherever he visits Tibetan monastery, which is not very often because everybody wants to visit. If you visit one, every few that he visits, which is more in Ladakh than anywhere else, because of Ladakh's height and good climate in summer, he goes there one. Every time he visits, he goes checks the monasteries and murals. And he says, "What's that? What's that?" He says, "I don't want all the monasteries, the temples to be filled with the written, frescoes of wrathful deities and all these makalas and all this dark, wrathful, ferocious looking." He said some Japanese Buddhist friends who went to Tibet, they returned home frightened. By visiting Tibetan temples, all the murals have got so many wrathful deities. He says, "I want all the monasteries to be filled with the frescoes of 17 Mananda Panditas." So I've seen in several monasteries in Ladakh where His Holiness Dalai Lama, they make huge Vasubandu, huge Nagarjunas everywhere. Every time he comes into there, they show him His Holiness very happy, and then the Ladakh is so happy. They were at least able to have the right frescoes in India. The reason for that is His Holiness said very clearly to the Tibetans, he said, "I'm sick of people talking, I'm Kailuk, I'm Sakya, I'm Nyingma, I'm Gelnying, Jonang. I want everybody to be Nalanda Buddhist." Which is really skillful, that everybody must remember they all must go through must attribute to the origin where the Dharma came from in India. Anyway, so that's a Vasubandu. Now the work of Vasubandu, this particular Abhidharmakosha, Abhidharmakosha. So word Abhidharma means, Abhi has a meaning of, it's like an intensifier, meaning like Abhi has a meaning of being in the forefront or being supreme. And Dharma means the truth, so means supreme truth or supreme science. So it means higher truth, higher knowledge. It's a metaphysical knowledge. Abhidharma has a meaning of metaphysical. It's not about metaphysical things so much, except when we talk about cosmos. Otherwise, all the subjects, mainly when we talk about this particular chapter, 5th chapter we are dealing with on the afflictive emotions, it's called Anusaya in Sanskrit. The Anusaya really means the subtle but developing. So the afflictions are so subtle, we don't even know they are afflictions. But nevertheless, it doesn't sit there idle. It is, if you don't watch it, if you don't do something about it, it is growing like a cancer. I can call it cancerous afflictions. Cancerous afflictions. Unless you know how to detect them early. They're so subtle, you don't know they exist. So Anusaya is the 5th chapter. There are actually 9 chapters altogether and 600 verses. That's Abhidharmakosha. They have the Chinese translations sometimes have shown 604 verses. So they are often when the Chinese translate, classical Chinese translation is based on number of characters. So I don't know whether that is the cause or not, but altogether there are 600 verses. Some Buddhist texts are named after number of the length of the text, like Aryadeva's Chatushataka is called 400 verses. It's named after the number of verses, not mentioned about the topic. Abhidharmakosha is not named after the length of the verses. If it is, it should call 600 verses. But it's not named after the length of the text. It is named after the subject, which is the Abhidharma. Abhidharma means it's supreme science. It's basically psychology. It's like the understanding nature of all the afflictive emotions, as well as of the deluded sentient beings. Not only talking about the afflictive emotion of the deluded sentient beings in the desire realm, but afflictive emotion of those in Rupa Dhatu and Arupa Dhatu. what distinction there is between the beings of the Rupa Dhatu, Arupa Dhatu, and the Kama Dhatu. Kama Dhatu is the desire realm. That's us as a human beings, is within the Kama Dhatu. So when it talks about the number of afflictions, categories of afflictions, they talk about the psychology of the mind, of the psychology of human beings in the human realm, and the devas in the Kama Dhatu realm, devas in the Rupa Dhatu realm, devas in the Rupa Dhatu realm. So that's the psychology of not just human beings and dogs and cats and mountains, but psychology of even those in the heavens. Even those in the heavens of the Kama Dhatu and the Rupa Dhatu, Arupa Dhatu, because they have lesser gross afflictions, but they have more subtle afflictions to need to work. So it's probably the most difficult subject of all the nine chapters. Why? Because it talks about 400 or 52 different psychological modalities of beings in different realms, depending on what you practice, what you don't practice. But we are completely afflicted right now, for instance, because we are in the Kama Dhatu, so you don't worry, don't think you are not deluded. We are profoundly deluded. We are profoundly deluded by as many as 84,000 afflictions. So this chapter is Abhidharma. It's supreme of the among the best in revealing the psychology of the afflictive emotions. So Abhidharmakosha has 9 chapters, and this one we are studying is the 5th chapter. This 5th chapter has 70 verses, and you wouldn't believe how dense they are. If we finish the first line of the first verse tonight, we'd be doing very well. Because firstly, you talk about the what the afflictive emotions, function of the afflictive emotions are, because the function of the afflictive emotions are that they keep you deluded and they make you stay suffering. And they are the they are the kind of thing that keeps the suffering and samsara operative as long as these anushaya or afflictive emotions remain dormant. So if you are going to be enlightened, even say to become free from Kama Dhatu realm to the Rupa Dhatu realm to the Arupa Dhatu realm. So we have 9 levels of meditative concentration that goes to these levels. So 9 meditative concentration. So all these worldly meditative concentrations, each of the worldly meditative concentration you do, before you get the insight of seeing the truth of suffering and truth of origin and truth of cessation and truth of the path, because each of these four noble truths has 4 different divisions. So altogether there are 16 moments through which you develop different realizations. So this is called path of seeing. Path of seeing. Path of seeing. If you get to achieve path of seeing, you abandon different numbers of gross afflictions. Gross afflictions, even in the Kama Dhatu realm, even as a human realm. Yeah. And then as you go through the 9 stages of the meditative concentration, you eradicate more gross ones even more. You have more subtle ones, such as the wrong view related afflictions remain still unpurified. So when we're talking about the different categories of afflictions, all the affliction has a common function to keep sentient beings rooted in samsara and sufferings. So And each and every individual's practicing of the path, the truth of the path, they're practicing the truth of the path in order to cause the cessation, of these anusayas. The cessation is the anusayas are concomitant, or they have reason, they have causes and conditions that makes them stay, because they're very subtle to be detected, and only detection is done by seeing the path. and those who see the path are very few. Those who walk contrary to the path are many. For instance, those who think body as a pure when it's impure, desiring the body as a undesirable though it is, but still desiring the undesirable, impure body as pure, outnumbers those who thinks body is impure and not desirable. And those who knows things are impermanent are very few. Those who want things to be permanent, so they are all mistakenly grasping to impermanent things as a permanent and impure things as a pure. They don't see this as that what they have to see. So that's the anusaya. Anusaya is like a cancer. You wouldn't know it is there. It slowly spreads. It captures you. It seizes you. So tonight we're going to talk about these 10 fundamental functions of the anusayas. What they do. What they do to make you not to see. How it seizes you and arrests you to your surprise. So the anusayas are the afflictions, and afflictions makes you to do the actions. The samsara is created by vicious actions we create under the influence of the anusayas. Anusayas, we don't use the word afflictions, the klesha. Why? Anusaya means, klesha means you can just grossly say greed, hatred, ignorance, jealousy, pride, and the wrong views. You can say that as the afflictions. But they use the word anusaya. Anusaya has the meaning of subtly developing. It's called subtly developing. For instance, when you're angry or when you're desirous, you don't even know you have it. It's not only has already gripped you and seized you, arrested you, you don't say, I'm desirous, I'm full of poison. You don't say that. People don't even know they have it. So what are the 10 functions of these 10 functions that roots us in samsara is the two. Like the cart of the horse, horse cart. And then when the horse pulls the cart, no horse cart is only one wheel. The horse cart has got at least two wheels, one on the right, one on the left, Then the horse can pull the cart and carry. Likewise, we are pulled by the cart, the horse cart wheel of karma and anusaya. Each of the anusaya is making us to do, physically do, verbally say, mentally think. These, we do not know that we are made to do, say, out of desire, out of ignorance, out of hatred, out of jealousy. We don't know we do. We know we are unconsciously doing, because the anusaya is the other wheel that's turning. And so the horse is pulling both wheels together, not one. So therefore, anusaya is so subtle as a cause, and the person doing the action doesn't know it's due to his anusaya. His action is his habit. He doesn't know it's him or his. He just does it. He just doesn't have any clue that action that he's consummating or about to consummate or have consummated past. Like we don't know we have consummated certain action in the past. We are consummating that now. We will be consummating that in the future. When you are a little bit on the path and refuge and seeing, you say, I've done this action in the past. I will not do this anymore. If you are in that, you are already on the path. It's just you're starting to affect the anusaya from affecting you with the habits of action, because you remember you did this in the past. Like a person who ruined his life through drinking for first 10, 15 years of life, and then he's just changed, and even without following the path, at least he's now free. He's problem from drinking. So he knows that his impulse of drinking will not kick in, because he knows he damaged his life so much by drinking in the past. He doesn't want to drink now. So that's at least that is his desire for alcohol is being stopped, but his desire for other desire is not stopped. He desired to be loved and respected and so on. Probably is another desire taking over. So desire is constant, for instance. The anusaya of desire is constant. And so therefore the perpetuating nature of the two wheels turning at the same time is what makes the anusaya perpetuating the action, and the wheel of the perpetuating wheel of action and perpetuating wheel of anusaya, and that makes the wheel keep turning. And therefore, the root of the existence, or some bhava means existence, bhava chakra means wheel of existence, wheel of samsara, wheel of existence is made to spin by these two wheels. Why? When any of these 6 root defilements or any secondary defilements we will talk about, unless they are terminated, unless they are purified by path of seeing or path of meditation, unless you have path of seeing, because when you're doing path of accumulation and path of preparation, they only suppress your affliction. They don't totally exterminate them. So only when you have path of seeing, that's why the first 2 path of accumulation, path of preparation, is just trying to suppress, so that they do not offend you or your people. Doesn't mean you don't act desirously. Doesn't mean you have no desire. You're just controlling desire. Or if you're not expressing anger, doesn't mean you have no anger. You're just controlling anger. We are bottling it up. So these first 2, path of accumulation, path of preparation, simply controls our social behavior, our interpersonal behavior, for whatever value there is. There must be at least some value. At least we know that people will not think badly of you anymore, because you're at least no longer behaving in a way they thought you were, and so on. So at least we try to save our face. So first 2 is path of accumulation, path of preparation. It's just a face saver. It doesn't liberate you from samsara. It simply keeps us in good books from each other, so to speak. Good thin book, by the way. Good thin book. The good big thick Buddhist book. I don't think we will go in. So, when we talk about how the anusayas are destroyed and reduced incrementally, is only when you enter into the path of seeing. Seeing the truth of suffering as truth of suffering. As a nature, knowing the truth of suffering as truth of suffering, subsequently knowing the truth of suffering as a truth of suffering, and then forbearance coming from that, realization comes from that. So each of the 4 Noble Truths has 4 these subcategories. Anyway, until that happens, the anusaya, the subtly developing afflictions are always there. So there are 10 functions. So let me go through the 10 of these functions. I have my Tibetan as well as... firstly, what does the afflictions generally, function of affliction? Affliction makes it firm and rooted. Firm and rooted. So it stabilizes you to become more dug in with your anger, For instance, if you're angry, you're more willing to dig in with anger. You're not willing to compromise your anger. If you express one, you want to increase it. Because then it almost makes all the affliction to become perpetuated, and you gain. It possesses you. You become possessed by the affliction, so much so that its root is now firmly grounded in you. It wouldn't give you a break, So you wouldn't have any. It possesses you, the person, in a particular way by the klesha, preventing it from being broken. Yeah. So you would not give in or give up that affliction. Firstly, you don't know even if it's affliction. You feel it's righteous. You got 110 reasons to keep angry. You don't even accept reduce, compromise even 1 point, because you got so many reasons why you're angry. So that's why all the righteous anger is, because they become so committed to suffering, and they don't know it is suffering, but they're so committed to create the very suffering. So that's first one is stabilizing the root, so much so that you make the root to possess you, that you do not want it to be broken. You don't want to give in anymore. Second is sustaining. It places itself to continue, not just stay angry, but not only today, but tomorrow, day after, week after, year after. You will not hesitate to stay angry next 10 years on that issue. You're committed to maintain its continuity. So this is what we're talking about. All resentment. All the resentment is this continuity, uninterrupted continuity of the hate and ill will or desire or jealousy or enmity or whatever it is. There's no sign of aging of the anger or the hurt or pain. There's even more sustenance and continuity, unbroken continuity of that. It continues to reproduce itself, establishing a series of afflictions. Then the storyline increases, Then it's not small story that it began in a small story. Now it become big story. It has hundreds of files. It's not just a couple of pages when it first the case was submitted. Then it become books and books of case, because it's a perpetually continuing, and no hesitation to back away. See, it's just like that's the samsara. And then the third one is it engenders its offspring. Means that it now generates the secondary afflictions. Not just the root affliction, now it generates other afflictions. Then the affliction becomes just flourishes. And just like the fire that burns the grass, that the fire does not fail to burn the grass, does it? Likewise, affliction does not fail to make you suffer. So all our sufferings is not caused by others. All our sufferings unfailingly is caused by our own anusayas, our own afflictions. Because the fire is lit by you, and that burning that is happening is yourself. You lit the fire, you burn yourself. And therefore, it engenders its affliction. Offspring means it generates many sub-afflictions, sub-afflictions, secondary afflictions. Means that it not only makes you suffer, but your offspring, your children, your family, they will all inherit your hatred and anger, and so on and so forth. It's just the fire spread everywhere. look at the inherited violence in the Middle East or anywhere in the troubled spot in the world. How many people have got ongoing enmity, resentment, tit for tat, all of this, it just came from that first fire. And it burnt oneself one too many times, and then it burns everyone who touches it. That's it. That's why people say, don't talk politics. Because when you do, you get completely caught up in it. So affliction completely incinerate everybody. Yeah, third one is it's almost accommodated for the suffering to persist. It deliberately hosts the suffering to persist, and it sort of spread and renders everyone with that suffering. And it is very inept to change, except to grow larger. It's much harder to stop. That's why those beings in the Kama Dhatu, their afflictions are much harder because they don't have merit. Those beings in the Rupa Dhatu, Arupa Dhatu, they don't have certain gross afflictions like hatred. They don't have, so they are much easier. They are much easier to develop those. The path of abandonment of seeing and path of abandonment of meditation and cultivation much easier because they don't have this kind of vehement nature of the afflictions. Fourth one is it engenders the concomitant afflictions and almost shamelessly. You don't mind. You don't care. You don't care if you suffer. You don't care if you have no shame, no embarrassment, and you think if you can make the other people wrong or prove them wrong, you don't mind whatever you have to spend. That's what people do, don't they? They don't care. They don't care because they want to clear their name. Remember? It's so deluded. So they become so driven. And then the fifth one is it leads to action, So then the affliction does not stay in you. It makes you to say, do, take action. Why? Because you actually now become action. Now the two wheels are turning simultaneously, induce the karma for a new existence. So it actually makes you the bhava chakra. Now you become that. You could not separate from your suffering and what you do. You are doing it. You have become the hell. You have become the hungry ghost. You have become the demigod, or you have become the jealous gods, or whatever it is. You have so much, but you feel so discontented. You become hungry ghosts. Everything what you have is not what you have. Everything what you have becomes like nothing. It becomes pointless. You become completely possessed by the poor me, and that kind of leads to the karma bhava. So it makes you to yourself to become the existence of your action. It leads to the action. Sixth one is it aggregates its causes, So now it aggregates, it perpetuates the causes, incorrect views and judgment and actions. Now one action is bad enough, but you don't care anymore. So you just aggregate it. You aggregate. No, you take more and more and more and more, and you become completely possessed. Yeah, you become completely possessed. It gathers its own requisites of suffering, repeatedly giving rise to improper mental application. Yeah, you wouldn't even know that your mind is completely besotted with those afflictions. One is completely submitted to the afflictions because you're possessed by the demonic afflictions. the rage, the desire, the hate, the ill will, the dishonesty, the doubt, the fear, and you just become completely possessed by it. Number 7 is it causes one to be mistaken with regard to objective consciousness. Yeah. So now one doesn't see mother as a mother, kindness as kindness. One who has cared for you as cared for you. You see them exact as opposite. So you become completely project everything opposite to what the person was, is. It totally makes yourself develop improper perception of the objects. So deluded, totally hostile imaginations, perception towards someone who is really loving and caring and giving and doing everything for you. One instead exactly opposite to it. One is completely deluded by it, but still one doesn't know it. One is harmed by this very proposition, but one doesn't know this is the harm that is self-caused. So, one is therefore very deluded with regard to objects. What we call in Lamde terminology, deluded perception. Then, to the sentient beings, due to afflictions, got deluded perception, which means impure perception. So then all the perception become impure and negative. So this is talking about the function of any of those afflictions. Anusayas. Number 8 is it bends the mental series towards the object, towards the rebirth. So it means it conducts the stream of consciousness, induces consciousness on the objects of rebirth. So then you actually become the state of consciousness of the being in which you are so possessed by. So you might be right now in human form, but you are not behaving as a humane form, as a human being. You are acting exactly like ferocious, aggressive creature or being who are aggressive, because you're almost reborn before having to die. You don't have to wait for rebirth. You already become very similar, not very far, not very directly reborn without changing the body. They might be living in luxurious surroundings, but they're already in hungry ghost. And so they don't have to even change the body to become hungry ghosts. They already are hungry. They don't have any contentment in what they have. They still feel hollow. They still feel threatened. They feel very jealous. And so their consciousness is completely possessed and has been hijacked to that new rebirth. When you're deluded. By any of the afflictions, remember, whichever affliction possess you, it completely possesses you to almost take you in a body that is not human, identity that is not a loved son. Loved son does not have loved son's feeling. He feels unloved and so on. It's totally deluded. And the 9th one is it completely avoids good. So it brings about falling away from the good, opposes the virtue, makes one to go astray without any hesitation. If you have any virtues, all declining now. You no longer have any faith left in the Dharma and cause and effect. You just don't care. It's very difficult to bring yourself, tow yourself towards to a line. You're almost you have lost your way from the virtue and gone to the non-virtuous way. So you're not almost like not reversible. Makes one go astray, and no hope of amending or changing or hope. They just feel pretty suicidal, really. And the 10th one is it becomes a bond. So now one is bondage. One is completely bonded, and therefore and bound in that situation, bound in the vicious cycle, preventing oneself, and it generates all forms of sufferings. So these are the functions of the anusayas, of these subtly growing afflictions. And sentient beings are experiencing this all the time. All of their so-called truth of suffering is caused by this. Now, the purpose of this chapter is so that one learns what these functions of these such afflictions are. So these 10 are just very general overview function of all the afflictions. Yeah, some has much more desire orientated, others are maybe hatred orientated, others are more jealousy orientated, but they are all mixed. They are all mixed and confused. So none of these afflictions are kind of, it's a standalone afflictions. These afflictions are, you could maybe say, when you're desiring something, you're enjoying something, you don't have hatred on the spot. But it is that very desire and desirous object that you are, the object to which you desire, object that which you desire, object that you enjoy right now, very soon can become objects of hatred. The truth seems completely opposite. At one moment you desire, another moment you hate it. So the same object. That shows that there is no standalone, there is no independent of any of these afflictions. The same object can become objects of, same object that you desired and wanted or loved or craved, now want nothing to do with it. See how deluded that it is. So it's nothing to do with object. It's all to do with this subtle but cancerous affliction, which is basically arresting your conscience from having any conscience. One moment you loved it, another moment you hate it. Another moment you want him to have it, you want to give it. Another moment you're jealous, he has that and that. Have you seen that, The mother wanted the son to marry a daughter, or a daughter-in-law. Then she tried very hard to find a daughter-in-law, and then all of a sudden she's very happy that her son got a nice wife. And all of a sudden she's jealous of the daughter-in-law. And she's competitive. She's envious. She's angry. And at the same time, she still loves her again. So all these afflictions, incredible, really. What we call the anusaya. Subtle, but constantly developing. So you need to see that as suffering. But we do not see that as suffering. We see this as cause of other actions. We do not see them as caused by our afflictions, our action. We see that as cause of the daughter-in-law or son-in-law or mother-in-law. See? Because we don't see the suffering. That we don't see the truth of suffering, let alone its origin. To see the origin, you got to see the function of the anusayas. That we are operating unconsciously under the influence of this drug, under the influence of this drinking and driving. So under the influence of drinking, the driving is not safe. Under the influence of not knowing these afflictions, your opinions, your actions are not safe. Of course, driving at least is driving. You don't drive, that's good, you know. But your opinion is still driving you all the time. You don't even... We're constantly driven by the opinions. The opinion is doing those 10 functions. The afflictions are forming our opinions, hijacking us, forcing us, almost like harassing us to do these things. We are under the ransom, under the gunpoint of these afflictions. We're performing all of these actions. So we need to see that truth of seeing, you know. Truth of seeing. Truth of seeing is path of seeing, you know. That's the third path. Until then, we will be practicing path of accumulation and path of preparation, which is still good. It still contains and restrains outer behavior. But we need to see the emptiness of them. We shouldn't just restrain and pull a good face about, but we should also see the emptiness of suffering and so on. But here in Abhidharmakosha, they don't talk about emptiness. This is Bhaveshika doctrine, remember? It only talks about what they are, what they do. They don't talk about their empty or true existence. So that's why, if you don't understand a little bit of teaching on emptiness and other Buddhist teaching, this subject is a bit too much for most people. It almost feels overwhelmed, you know, overwhelmingly sort of frightening, you know. But when you already have refuge, when you believe in the triple gem, when you engage in the path of accumulation, you at least practicing, knowing more consciously how to exercise restraint, the wheel of karma. Wheel of karma cannot be stopped unless wheel of anusaya is detected. If you can't restrain and identify anusaya, you can't stop the action. Because most people are habitually doing it again, saying it again, thinking it again. They can't see it's their habit. They don't know it's one too many times. They don't have the humility or merit to apprehend it when they need to be apprehended. Why? They don't have merit. So firstly, we have to practice path of accumulation. Sambhara marga. We have to accumulate wholesome conduct that is concordant with truth of the path. The truth of the path is the cause of the truth of the cessation. Because truth of path of the action stops the truth of path of action through the path, you know, cessation of the action of the negative deeds. Because if one is doing accumulation of meritorious deeds, one stops the non-virtuous deeds. So the path of truth of the path stops the path of then the cessation. That's only action level. But anusaya level is still long way to go. But being able to restrain our body or words, because so socially it's only the body and words. Physical and verbal deeds are the one people will see or hear, but they can't hear your thoughts. They can't see your thoughts. So you might still be seething with anger. You pretend that you're smiling in the front and you don't really mean it, but you still do. You know, there's a lot of that. You know, people try to hide their afflictions. Outwardly, socially, they don't show it because they have worldly reasons to do it, but still more meritorious to, in civil society, people are more civilized not to behave as uncivilized. So accumulation merit is like civilizing our social behavior, but that's only controls the afflictions and the affliction perpetuated actions. If we do it meritoriously, with goodwill and consciously aware, but sometimes people doing it but they practice patience, but they hate practicing patience, for instance. They're patient, but they hate practicing patience. They're waiting, but they hate to wait. They're not waiting gracefully. They're not practicing patience peacefully. They're practicing patience agitatingly. Depending to your level of merit and faith and meditation, you will have to look within how much is your attitudes, your thoughts, are changing on top of your physical and verbal actions that you don't perform. You will see lots of peace and happiness in the person. This is temporal happiness, We're talking temporal happiness. Accumulation merit. This is a result of accumulation merit. Because this text doesn't deal any with accumulation merit. But we have to know that in order to help us. How does beyond... Because this text all of a sudden, when we talk about in the next week, it goes straight into what of the afflictions are abandoned by path of seeing, those on the people on the path of the people in the Kama Dhatu, this is us, and others in the Rupa Dhatu, Arupa Dhatu, which is really academic, we don't really have much relevance to us, but it's good to know, those in the Rupa Dhatu, Arupa Dhatu don't have these particular afflictions, right from the very beginning. Because like the Arupa Dhatu, they don't have any ordinary hatred because they don't have this interactive relationship with the object, because they don't have sense organs, So they are in many ways advantaged by not having to have many gross afflictions. But for them, when it comes to the five wrong view related, they're much harder to get rid of because they think they are supreme. They're attached to the status as they're more realized than they are. So you can see these things, of course, become a little bit complicated, but it's really good to know that from here onwards, when we talk next week, it will talk about what kind of path of seeing level of desire abandons which afflictions, according to which of the Four Noble Truths. Each Four Noble Truth has 4 different levels. So your realization, the truth of suffering, has 1 level of abandonment. Truth of origin of suffering, seeing the truth of origin of suffering, has another level of abandonment, and meaning freedom. Freedom, abandonment is a word which is freedom. And slowly the gradation changes depending to what level of progress you have. Even sometimes you might have been angered by somebody in the past. Nowadays, after a while, these days, whenever they don't anger, you just feel compassionate with them. That might be the case, because you have so matured. You can see that see how much we are no longer bothered by. How much we do not think like that anymore. How much we do not think as often as we used to think. So you can see whether we are how much on the path we are actually causing a dent to the anusayas and actions perpetuated by them. If you can restrain the actions, that means your anusayas are also kept at the bay. Anusaya not spilling over into actions. So anusayas are controllable. Anusaya are not truly existing. Anusayas are impermanent. Anusaya is not truly existing. Remember that. These things only comes when you have path of seeing. When you have path of seeing, you don't see the anusayas as truly existing, let alone permanent. But a lot of the time, people don't even accept suffering. They think we shouldn't have suffering. They're so infuriated with the suffering. They don't understand suffering. They don't accept suffering. They don't have the truth of suffering seeing reality. They don't have the vision of seeing truth of suffering as truth of suffering. They deny truth of suffering. They reject truth of suffering. So when you understandably accept the suffering, unsatisfactoriness, then you don't react, you don't perpetuate an action that rejects, that denies, that resists the suffering. When you accept the truth of suffering, it is a pacification of the suffering. The truth of suffering is not standalone, it is universal. It's not just you and me, it is universal to all who are subjected to the anusayas. That makes you to understand the truth of suffering. Means you accept the suffering. You don't reject and perpetuate it unconsciously. You consciously stop it by accepting it as the nature of existence. So the function of the what we call afflictive emotions, anusayas. This is what we have discussed tonight, and this will enable us to go over the actual verses, which then list the types of the typology of the afflictions. Six afflictions, 7 afflictions, 10 afflictions, 98 afflictions, 412 affliction, 514 affliction. They have different ways of categorizing depending to what level of realization you have. So with this we'll stop here. Thank you, everyone. It is not a subject that is enjoyable to listen to, but at least enable us to make a more easy to identify when we are gripped and arrested by this, and we might be able to pause the anusaya welling into us, and then forcing to turn the wheel of action. If the wheel of action is hastened, it's because anusaya is on hold. And that is mindfulness, when we talk about mindfulness. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So let's do the dedication of merit in listening, comprehending, understanding, and relating, and with every intention to pack these things as you will pack for your lunch or journey. In everyday life, we need to be more conscientious about apprehending the anusayas and their influence in the actions that we are perpetuating in our thoughts, because thoughts are the harder thing to detect. Speech is easier to detect. Even that, some people don't hesitate speaking what they think and actions. But socially speaking, most people are a little bit more mindful of what they do or what they say in front of the person. But remember, it's not what you do or don't say in front of people. What we think is harming us more. So that's why it's very important to distinguish the physical, verbal, and mental anusayas or actions. Because if any subtle mental anusayas are apprehended, that will prevent becoming words and deeds. And therefore, we are much more fitter to control and keep on hold onto the anusaya in the first place in the mental level. So you could see the incredible perceptivity of your mind, seeing your mind with or without affliction, and what to do when the affliction is making a grip, and how you will then call in and take refuge and remember the Dharma, remember the way, remember the gong, and to wake us up, so to speak. Okay, thank you. Now we'll do the dedication merits. Doing all of this, thank you. Oh, by this merit, da di fo men zhen gen hom ne zhen me hai le bere do bi from the ocean ba do de se ne de here da Mahayana teaching whatever merit I have me ho be began levels to hold the Mahayana teaching courage manju shrenyu and sama tabadra de life following all the example I shall dedicate all the merit excellent body jida trebe where no danza where has been born made angry freely with the generation. Thank you, everyone.